Welcome to the Asshole Book Club. Today we're doing Chapter 9 of Catwoman Soul Stealer by Sarah J. Maas. Let's see. In the last chapter, Selena, or Holly, and Luke went to the same party at a museum for rich people, and Selena decided to get under Luke's skin for the sole purpose of she was bored. So that's nice. Before I start, let me know if that high-pitched noise that's sometimes in my videos is gone. I think it was one of my power bars, so I just unplugged it for this. Hopefully it's not there anymore. Alright, Chapter 9. Selena had only risked 5 minutes with the painting during the gala. On the arm of a beautiful oil executive, she'd strolled into the long hall where the painting of a nondescript bowl of fruit hung on the far wall. It had been roped off, with a bored-looking security guard a few steps away to make sure no one took photos or got too close. The oil exec actually knew a thing or two about art, and she'd rattled off various techniques that the artist had used. Selena had nodded, leaning in as though she were studying the details. Instead, she'd been eyeing up the size and weight of the small painting. Her heartbeat had pounded through her, but she managed to subtly suggest to the woman that perhaps they could return for another viewing of the painting in a day or so. And the exec had turned to the guard and asked just how long the painting would be on display. "Only through the weekend, ma'am." Confirmation that Selena had to move tonight. She had made sure that more than a few people, a frowning Luke Fox included, saw her swaying precariously as she headed to the bathroom toward the end of the night, and never emerged. At least, not in that golden dress. The security guards, tired and eager to head home, quickly checked the bathrooms upon leaving, none bothering to look up at where she'd stretched herself out over the top of a stall. Only when silence had fallen and she had given enough time for even the few remaining security guards to have settled into heavy boredom did Selena slip from the bathroom. Stashing her bag with her league suit and matching helmet in the bathroom's utilities closet had been the hardest part, the riskiest. She'd done it during a daytime visit yesterday, hauling them inside with an oversized tote, waiting in the bathroom nearest the gala hall until it was empty, and she could pick the lock on the closet door. She'd buried both the helmet and the suit at the bottom of a giant box of toilet paper, tucked it underneath another box of the stuff, surely they wouldn't go through all of it in 24 hours, and sent up a prayer to whatever ancient gods were watching that the janitors wouldn't find it. They hadn't. And now, the museum dark and quiet as a tomb, Selena slipped through the shadows of the various galleries, a thrill creeping through her veins with every movement. Ancient statues watching on, she filtered the sounds that the receivers on her ancient helmet picked up. A coughing guard 5 galleries away, a gurgling fountain in the center of the Egyptian hall, birds' talons scraping against the fogged glass roof. The glass panels of the built-in goggles gave her perfect night vision, turning the world into greens and yellows. Nothing but art and shadows. Each of these paintings was valuable, but stealing one of them was not the statement she needed to make. But first, the security system. She'd backed into the museum's network to draw up the blueprints for the building, had memorized them meticulously, knew that there was a centralized room in sublevel 1 that controlled every switch. Knew it was staffed by 2 guards at night, thanks to a memo she found in the email servers, each with panic buttons on hand. Too risky. In shutting down the entire security system increased the risk of a guard in another part of the museum noticing the lack of little red lights. So she'd picked her grid, combed through the blueprints to find where the alarm wires ran through the building and the carefully hidden hubs where one might access them. Another clever puzzle to solve, one that set her blood thrumming. Selena silently eased through the hallways of the museum, counting her steps to the nearest locked wall panel. She'd easily cleared 500,000 in valuables tonight. But that 10 million from the painting, one hell of a payday. Scanning the halls around her, Selena stopped before an ancient invisible panel built into the wall. She'd eyed it twice now while walking through here at the gala, using each step to glance to figure out its lock. Selena pressed a section on the utility belt slung across her hips, a little compartment opening up to reveal an assortment of lockpicks and clever, useful things. Selecting one, keeping an eye on the hall around her, she slid the pick into the lock. Idiots for leaving the panel here, though it made her life easier. With a click, the panel swung open, revealing a network of switches and wires. Her helmet scanned them, providing her with the feedback she needed to narrow in on the wire to disable. No cutting. That'd disable the entire system. But rerouting the alarms, Selena pulled another device from her belt, a cord with a USB at one end and a smaller port on the other. She fitted the latter end into a small slot at the base of her helmet, then slid the USB into the security panel itself. Instantly data whirred by security feeds, routes. Her death mask sorted through it all and began creating a false loop of data for several halls ahead, so that even when she entered it, crossing over trigger beams, the loop of old data would keep playing for the main computer, along with the video footage from the mounted cameras. When it was done, she unhooked the cord and closed the panel. One guard lay ahead, stationed just to the left of the open doorway down the hall. She'd seen him these past 2 nights, half asleep, nodding off at least twice an hour. A crack of her bullwhip would wake him up. She smirked at the thought. On silent feet, Selena approached the hall, flexing her clawed fingers. She would disable him, not kill him. The man wasn't involved in this, didn't deserve anything worse than a headache. Taking a small, bracing breath, she neared the corner, the inhale before the storm. Quiet as death, Selena swept around the corner, angling for the guard, who she knew would be standing just 2 feet to her left. But her fingers closed on empty air. The man was already down, unconscious. No sign of injury except for some sort of shimmering green powder on the lapels of his uniform. Selena whirled, knees bending, a hand going for the bullwhip at her left hip while her goggles scanned the room. A soft female laugh flitted from a darkened corner, the corner where the fox painting would be. "You know," the stranger said, stepping into a shaft of moonlight leaking through the glass roof above. "I was hoping you'd be a woman." Selena rose to her full height and kept her claws unsheathed as she stalked towards the young woman standing on the other side of the gallery. In the dim light, the woman's red hair was blood dark, her skin moon pale. A pretty face smiled above a green bodysuit with countless pockets. Young, around Selena's own age, 19 or 20. "Happy to please," Selena said, her voice raspy and warped thanks to the League's standard voice modifier. She jerked her head to the small painting the stranger was standing in front of. "But I think that belongs to me." "Technically," the stranger said, vibrant emerald eyes flickering with amusement as she gestured to the painting a few feet behind her, "it belongs to Luke Fox." Her hands were covered with dark green gloves. No, vines. Those were closely wrapped, Thin vines all along her fingers. Organic, living organism. Selena's helmet supplied. Impressive. The woman angled her head, her heavy curtain of red hair slipping over her slim shoulder. Small white flowers seemed to be woven throughout. And technically, I was here first. You only got here first, Selena said, sliding the bullwhip free and letting it unspool on the marble floor. Because I was disabling the alarm. It's mine. She hadn't used that tone since those days in the East End, enforcing Mika's rule. The stranger snorted, some of the flowers in her hair closed, as if they were alive too. Do you know that there's a species of dung beetle that just waits for other beetles to create their reserves and then takes them down? It happens all the time in the animal kingdom. It's called kleptoparasitism. Selena smiled, even though the stranger couldn't see. You're poison ivy. Go. With the living plants on her, there was no one else the stranger could be. Selena had heard and read the rumors. A mad scientist who specialized in plant-based weapons and toxins. That she had no allegiance to any criminal organization, had outright refused to be recruited, and only sought to save the planet, by whatever means necessary. The more outlandish stories claimed that Ivy had become plant-based herself. Perhaps reality wasn't so far from the myth. The vines around Ivy's wrist began writhing, as they were small snakes readying for a strike. And you are? She dealt with posturing plenty, both in the Leopards and the League, so Selena prowled across the parquet floor, aiming right for that painting, getting a sense of whether the other woman would hold her ground, whether she'd cede direct access to the painting. No concern to you? Selena got within 3 yards of Ivy before the young woman sidled a few feet away from the painting and the reach of Selena's bullwhip. Still, Ivy lifted her chin and said tartly, I'll be taking that painting, thank you. Brave woman, Selena snickered, halting 3 feet from the painting. To fund your Save the Rainforest bullcrap? A low hiss, one that sounded like it came from something other than Ivy's mouth. Selena's helmet ran another scan and only the same generic readout. Living organism. Ivy demanded, You know how much money was at that gala tonight? For what? This museum? These dead, lifeless things? Ivy gestured around them, vines shifting. So sad, Selena chuckled, knowing precisely what beast she was prodding, or plant she supposed. Just awful. She studied the fruit bowl painting, hardwired to the wall, exactly as it had been earlier, separate from the alarm system. It'd start shrieking the moment she touched it. Selena sheathed her claws but kept the whip clenched in her left hand. She'd planned 3 escape routes, anticipating the guard's layout, but Ivy had added another variable. Selena asked without looking over at Ivy. You buy that exterminator at the ball getup at the Halloween store? Ivy chuckled, drawing Selena's attention to her left. Ivy's head bobbed as she surveyed Selena's League battlesuit, the night vision lenses, the receptors on her helmet. Yeah, but now I wish I hadn't. Now I wish I hadn't passed up the sexy cat costume. The corners of Selena's mouth twitched upward. First rule of disorder, find some interesting company. Ivy kept within range of the painting even as Selena stood directly before it. Are you allied with any of the gangs or bosses? I answered to no one. Ivy hummed in approval. Why'd you come to Gotham? Curiosity. Doesn't that sort of thing usually not end well for your kind? Selina huffed a laugh, the sound devoured by her mask. Not much time. Every second delayed was a risk, a potential disaster. Yet she said, things have been quiet and the money is easy picking. Ivy yielded her spot to the left of the painting and approached Selina's side to face the painting directly. Selina unsheathed the claws on the hand she had tucked behind her, monitoring Ivy's every breath. Ivy said, "You sound like a cyborg with that helmet." Selina bit her lip to keep from laughing again. Ivy pointed with a green-wrapped finger to the painting. "Here's the deal. We split it 50-50. 90-10. Be grateful you get $1 million out of capitalizing on my hard work." Ivy shook her head, red hair catching in the moonlight, some of those blossoms opening once more. 60-40. 85-15, and stop wasting my time. Ivy opened her mouth, and then the shouting began. Selina's death mask offered an analysis of how long it'd take the museum guards to approach. 1 minute. "I thought you disabled the alarms," Ivy hissed, the vines along her hands now roving up her arms. Selina scowled beneath the helmet, shifting her bullwhip to her right hand. "I did." Someone had been waiting then. Anticipating this robbery, her mouth dried out, though something like lightning shot through her veins. 75-25, and that's it, Selina said, tossing the whip over her shoulder and lunging for the painting. Alarms screamed as she hauled the small frame off the wall, yanking out a piece of canvas from the folded satchel tucked into her utility belt to carefully wrap around the century-old painting. No point in stealing the damn thing if she destroyed it on her way out. Selina tucked the painting into her satchel, nestling it amid a cocoon of padding. Another reason why she'd picked this painting. It was small enough to be easily transported. Her lenses picked up a flurry of movement, not from the hallways beyond, but from Ivy in front of her. Selina lifted her head in time to duck. Unnecessarily. Ivy snickered as she lobbed a gold-rimmed purple flower to the nearest hallway. The blossom, the size of a softball, pale green smoke rippled out from its center. "Fancy," Selina told her. Ivy's grin was a slash of white. "Better hope that mask has a gas filtration system." It did. Selina only pointed to the small staff door tucked into the corner, unlocked. No doubt thanks to Ivy's own entrance. "If you run like your mouth, we'll get out of here in one piece." Ivy didn't bother to reply as she turned toward the staff-only door and bolted. Selina sprinted after her, satchel bobbing at her side, the bullwhip in one hand while she glanced back. Right as the guards came barreling through the spores leaking from the flower, coughing. She lingered at the door for a heartbeat, just in time for them to get a glimpse of her. The suit, the empty spot where the painting had been. Just in time for Selina to sketch a bow, right as the guards inhaled that green smoke, likely custom-made by Ivy in her lab, from whatever combination of plants, and collapsed onto the parquet floor. "Fancy and effective," Selina admitted as she shoved through the door, and charged after Ivy into the labyrinth of staff passages. Nisa and Talia would approve. Alright. Sirens cleaved the night, but Selina's suit fed her the intel she needed. Heading toward the museum, not after them as they escaped into the nearby quiet. Posh neighborhood, full of embassies and old money residences. The last place any sane criminal would flee to, considering the security cameras mounted on every building, the guards posted at every other entrance, which is why they kept to the rooftops. Ivy had no issue scaling the building behind the museum using the fire escape, and apparently no problem with cardio or heights as she kept pace with Selena, leaping without hesitation over the distances between buildings. Excuse me. They made it 3 blocks before a particularly large gap appeared, large enough to merit careful consideration on how to take the jump. Selena slowed, panting lightly, lungs barely needing to push themselves. Ivy's breath was heavier, her eyes bright. Selena studied the gap, the cop cars that had just arrived at the museum illuminating the night sky above them in flickering blue and red. The lights cast Ivy's hair in varying hues of deep crimson and purple, the silky strands ruffling past her face in the cool night breeze. No sign of the little flowers, as if they'd tucked into the safety of her hair. Too far, Ivy observed, around gasps for air, steadying the gap. Take the drain... Take the drain pipe down. That would take too long and take them too far from where she needed to be. So Selena shook her head, flicking her wrists to free the claws from her suit. Ivy flinched, backing away a step. Her left hand went to a pocket in her bodysuit with curling pink petals poking out of it. Selena didn't care to find out exactly what that flower could do. She gestured with her claws to the gap. For climbing, she said, and wiggled her fingertips. Strange to have to explain herself, her methods. Strange, Selena realized, to have become someone who required explaining. A wraith. A ghoul. She'd given up everything to wear that title, that skin. She hadn't realized just how far it might separate her from others, that she might become other herself. Ivy blinked, hand lowering from the botanical surprise she kept in her pocket. You can't make that jump. I've cleared worse. Not a lie. Selena backed up on the roof, calculating the distance, the speed she'd need to clear that gap and land safely. She'd never considered that those long, all-out runs she'd done for the vault and gymnastics might be a training of another sort. Not until the league. She stopped at the farthest edge of the roof and glanced to Ivy. You want in? Then you'd better learn to keep up. Then she was sprinting toward the roof edge, body falling back into muscle memory, into the training she'd had pounded into her bones, her breath. Show off, Ivy groused as Selena sprinted past. Arms in formation, legs eating up the distance, body bracing for the leap. Clear the ravine. A cold, unruffled order. Oh, we're in a flashback. Selena had glanced between Nisa Al Ghul and the ravine that cleaved to the 2 granite mountains. All around them, the unforgiving towers of the Dolomites watched as unfeelingly as her teacher. The 5 other acolytes, mercifully, seemed to hesitate. Nisa only lifted a tanned, scar-flecked hand and pointed to the narrow ledge and a path across the ravine. The way home lies over there. The path behind you is closed. A hard, brutal smile, the opposite of the sleek, coy smirks of her elder sister Talia. Clear the ravine, or live here. Or die at the bottom far below. Selena's palms turned sweaty, her breakfast churning in her stomach. The other acolytes, all of them in the League's black battle suits, began sizing up the gap, the angle, the wind. She'd learned as much about the other girls as she could, their movements, their reflexes, their height and weight, and favored weapons. The real details, the ones that mattered, none of them shared that information. Where they came from, what life they'd led before they had brought Talia al Ghul, what life they'd led that had brought Talia al Ghul to come knocking. All Selena knew was that they hailed from all over the world. The boys, apparently, were trained elsewhere. And Anaya, the acolyte standing before her, had come from India. She spoke even less than Selena, though she had been there for 2 months before Selena arrived at the sprawling, luxurious compound deep in the mountains. If Selena had anything close to an ally here, it was Anaya. She was the only one who ever sat beside Selena at the mess hall or paired with her in classes. Never through any voiced request or invitation, but just a silent, steady presence. That often made other acolytes think twice before pushing either of them. When the sun sets, Nisa went on in English, her accent lilting. The temperature will drop below freezing. I have no plans to be here when it does. But you will be, she didn't need to add. Then Nisa launched into a sprint, her slim body eating up the rocky ground, black hair tied in a tight braid from her face. Not a pretty face like Talia's. Where Talia's was marble-hewn in its perfection, Nisa's had been carved from granite. And, like the granite peaks around them, Nisa's stride never faltered, never showed any signs of emotion beyond that cool brutality. It was set in the same expression as she hurtled to the ravine ledge and leapt. No ropes, no equipment, nothing beyond icy will. The acolyte from Eastern Europe swore in some Slavic language, Serbian perhaps, recognizing the languages of the world, another course of instruction. Nisa soared over the gap, body arcing perfectly. The only bit of beauty the Al Ghul half-sister would ever have, in the precision of her movements. She made it look easy, landed with a crunch of rock and a smooth roll that flowed into a standing position. Selena couldn't help the half-smile that curved her mouth as Nisa leaned against a boulder, crossing her arms, her battlesuit dusty from the landing, and waited. Selena didn't look at the other opponents, didn't engage in the silent battle of who would go first, or whether it would be foolish to do so, or if it would earn them a kernel of Nisa's respect, or if the one who went last would be deemed cowardly, or smart to study the other's mistakes and learn from them. Selena turned, stalking back to the exact point from which Nisa had launched herself into that run. Gave herself a few more feet beyond it. She studied the faint path of footprints Nisa had taken. The angle of the jump beside her, Anaya did the same. And her sort of ally murmured, too softly for the other girls to hear. They might try to spook us when we run. She was right, likely by shouting, maybe even stepping into their path. And no one would punish them for it. No, Nisa would likely reward them. Another bit of training. Not to lower your guard, Nisa would say. They were all merely instruments to carry out the League's mission. Better to weed out the defective ones before sending them into the field. Survival of the fittest. Biology had been one of her favorite classes. It seemed the League took Darwinism to another level. Nisa still waited, arms crossed over her chest. Someone had to make a move. Even from the distance, Selena could have sworn the woman's eyes met hers, full of challenge and invitation. She'd jumped and run across the rooftops with the leopards, hauling TV sets and other stolen goods. Then, the drop had been 30 feet, not 300, but no less fatal. And perhaps it was the thought of those leopards she'd left behind a month ago. But Selena murmured to Anaya, "Go, now. I'll block for you." Warning flared in Anaya's rich brown eyes, her long black hair fluttering in the fierce wind roaring through the peaks. A test of trust. Selena only held the other girl's gaze, steady and calm. "Now," she repeated, as the 4 acolytes began approaching, smiling faintly. "Yeah, they tried to spook them, trip them." With a shallow nod, Anaya sucked in a breath and launched into a sprint. A blonde acolyte moved first, scooped up a small rock to throw, discreet and tiny enough to go unseen as her arms cocked back. Selena grabbed another stone, slinging it out, slamming right into the blonde's arm, forcing her fingers to splay and drop the rock that had been aimed for Anaya. Anaya hurtled down the narrow path. The acolyte from Serbia moved next, lunging toward Anaya's path to force her to dodge aside and lose traction. Selena was on her before Anaya could register the movement. The Serbian acolyte let out a grunt of pain as Selena stomped down on her foot. The acolyte's body arced downward as if she'd grabbed her own foot right into Selena's awaiting elbow. She'd done the move 1,000 times in fighting rings, always followed by her next move, locking the Serbian acolyte's arm and hurtling her toward another 2 approaching acolytes, as if they were no more than ropes in the ring, sending the 3 of them staggering back. Selena didn't wait, didn't give them a moment to recover as she whirled and ran. Anaya soared through the mountain air, the breeze shoving her to the right. But she landed, barely, and scrabbled her way onto the ledge, where Nisa didn't so much as look at her. No, because Nisa was watching Selena as she thundered down the narrow path toward the ravine as the acolytes recovered enough to realize her plans and look for retaliation. She didn't have as much space as Anaya had to make the jump. With the attack, she'd yielded 20 feet. But Selena raced onward, the ledge nearing, the drop beyond beckoning. Pain flared on the side of her head, a starburst of agony. She stumbled a step but kept going as a few more hurled rocks landed behind her. She didn't care where the other acolytes had come from, but she knew where she'd been born, where she was raised. She wondered if the others knew, if Nisa knew, that the pain was secondary. The pain was an old friend, introduced long before those fights, before the leopards, introduced courtesy of her mother. So the blow to the head did not stop her. It had never stopped her, that kind of pain. And Selena cleared the ledge and leapt, throwing herself a bit further left to account for the gusting wind. She only heard the screaming air and the roughness of her breathing, only felt the bitter cold and the warmth of blood trickling down the side of her face. The opposite ledge was too far, still too far. Every nerve in her body came screaming awake as she slammed into the edge of the cliff, half on, half off, gravity hauling her down. Anaya lunged for her, but Nisa held out an arm, blocking her path. Selena's nails broke and screamed in agony as she dug them into the rock. But where Nisa had refused to help, nature threw her a bone. A rise in the stone was enough of a jutting lip that her hands latched on and held. Nisa made no move to help Selena as she hauled herself up, arms trembling, head pounding. And when Selena at last found solid ground beneath her, when her temple was dripping blood onto the gray stone as she crawled, panting from the ledge toward Nisa, she looked up at her instructor. Nisa glanced between her and Anaya. And Selena could do nothing as Nisa shoved Anaya over the cliff edge. Anaya did not scream, there was only silence, and then a thud that echoed over the granite peaks. Selena couldn't move, couldn't do anything other than stare at Nisa, her dark eyes so cold. Nisa offered no explanation. None. And flashback over. Selena cleared the leap between buildings, claws finding purchase on the stone, metal shrieking and sparked in their wake. But she didn't hear the thud of her body on the metal roof. She heard that thump and crack of Anaya on the ravine floor, and the police sirens were little more than the howling wind through the Dolomites. She uncurled to her feet and looked back toward where Ivy had watched, head angled. Not bad for a cat, Ivy called. Selena just blew the dust off her claws. She'd added them to her gloves after she returned to the league compound and had the blow to her head cleared by the physician. She'd gone right down to the lab, head still throbbing inside, still utterly numb and quiet, and helped herself to the assortment of blades and metals in the room, left there for acolytes to tinker with. Selena had selected the hardest steel she could find and began to work. Selena gestured to Ivy, reining in the thrill coursing through her. Head down, limbs in as tight as you can get. But Ivy backed away a step, surprise and fear lighting her face. Selena whirled, hand going to her bullwhip. Leaning against the roof doorway behind her, cloaked in shadows, Selena smiled beneath her mask. Ivy called from across the way. Keep the painting, she pointed to the man waiting behind Selena. Good luck dealing with him, Catwoman. Then Ivy was gone, running for the door that would lead her down through the building. Selena's death mask sized up the male before her. 6'3", jacked, or at least his bluish-gray metal suit was. And glowing across his broad chest, an emblem in the darkness, a bat. Selena inclined her head in greeting. I was wondering when you'd show up, Batwing. And that's the end of the chapter. So in this one, Ivy was the one that named Catwoman. Interesting. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching or listening to the whole video. And please like and subscribe. After I do chapter 10, I will make a playlist of all the chapters and then start adding them one by one. And yeah, I'm almost, I'm like a third of the way through the series, so nice. Have a good day, everyone, and I will see you later.